All right, let's start with answers, and maybe we'll have a round 2 of questions. So, would you like to begin? Let's. Yes, Sue, do you want to begin? Let's go from.
Yes, thanks, Judith. That question.
The microphone.
Right. There is indirect testimony in Shoah. Anyways, you say, turn it on as well.
Oh.
Is that on?
Yes.
Even I can hear that. The example that you mentioned, and also Adam Chernyakov, who's kind of invoked, but he's not really there. And the phrase that you used about the rabbi in Shoah, Lansman appoints himself as the voice of the missing rabbi, I think he does that with Weissmandl, and that's why I quoted that thing at the end that I didn't really comment on, that Lansman says about Weissmandl. He realised there was something really particular going on, and it's as if he's talking about himself. I feel he has identified himself with the charismatic, wonderful rabbi who can direct people to say what he wants them to say. So I sort of feel that in a way, is the underlying identification in that example of indirect testimony. So thank you for putting it that way.
Hana, do you want to answer those questions?
So, thank you for the question. From what I read, there have been very early testimonies that have been published from Kraus and Alžedničková and one more, but that was supposed to be more politically, according to what I read, these 3 were considered more that they survived because of political reasons. And after that there was a long period of time when nothing was published, not the autobiographies. And the book was supposed to be published in '68, but then because of the Russian invasion it didn't happen. And I read the opinion of 2 of his editors later of his book that it was probably because of his opinions or his descriptions of Ukrainian guards, where he also somehow, when he saw the Russians coming to Prague, he was also making some comparisons with the Ukrainian guards in Treblinka.
That makes more sense. Rosemary, would you like to answer?
Sure, I'd like to combine both. So maybe I should explain what the digital storytelling research project practice is, because maybe I assume people knew that. So basically, it's looking for primary sources that go along with the literature and combining those into research-oriented projects. So the students, they do their storyboarding, they write their script, they get all the materials, and they put together like a video essay. So that's the underlying idea of using the testimonies and other sources with the chosen literature as a way to overcome some of the limitations that people see and the writers have when they're putting together stories for children. The University of Houston has a digital storytelling project.
Yes, I think, yeah.
And so they had one good one I saw on that website was about the work of the crucible. And so the student took the crucible and he put it into the period of the McCarthy era and the period of the colonial Salem witch trials, and it was very sophisticated. But it's not that many that do that.
We have 3 minutes for another round of questions.
Oh.
Any questions from anyone? If not, I'll take the prerogative of the chair, and I have 2 questions. One is for Sue. Sue, my question is, what has impressed me most in the last 2 days, and I was part of this, was, and we discussed this again this morning, is how so many factors go into one's life, how many factors have to be involved in analyzing testimony? That one's life, that testimony changes over time, that there might be a core testimony, but so many things are added. But my question to you is methodological. Can you do that with Weissmandl or anyone else if other people are testifying about him? How do they know about what was going on in his... It's hard enough to understand one's own mind, let alone to understand somebody else's mind. So that's my question for you. And then, and Hana, I have a question. I'm fairly familiar with Glaser, and his is very interesting because Glaser is both a heroic figure and a very tragic figure. And how do you make sense of that life through his testimony? Shimon Redlich is basically, you see his personality. It hasn't changed very much, regardless of the test, what he adds, what he subtracts. But here you have a person who's somehow, to me, it's two poles in a way. And the other question I had, Philip Müller, who was a Sonderkommando, was also from Czechoslovakia, and I think he also published his memoirs early. How was that? We didn't mention him, but and he also appears in Shoah. And he probably had some bad things to say about Ukrainians too, is my guess. So how did, wasn't he published in Czechoslovakia? I believe so, that's my question. Why wasn't he more politically sensitive? Okay, Sue, do you want to answer my question?
Yes, that's a good question. I actually think Lansman's not really interested in testimony in the way that we usually think of it. He's not interested in biographies of people, so you don't get an impression anyway in Shoah of what happened to people. You don't hear about the early bits of Glazer's life or what happened later. So people are anyway mouthpieces, and in particular his interest is in those who can't tell their stories, and often his questions are about what did people say just before they died. So his interest is in a way about people who aren't there.
Well, what's your interest?
What's my interest?
Yes.
It's just so fascinating. That's my interest. Yeah.
But all right. Well, because you must be. I'm sure that you're interested also in people's lives, not just the fact.
Yes, I am. And in fact, when you do discover that often the bits of the interviews that were cut out are about how people escaped from the camps that they were in, which are not in Shoah itself, that's really fascinating to hear. But it's not relevant to what he was trying to do. Mm-hmm. So I suppose another way you could think of the Weisswandel material is that it would be like an impressionist painting. There'd be lots of different bits of colour coming together, but not the central subjective entity as you were suggesting, which is a different kind of testimony, is what I would say.
Very good.
Thank you.